Every Kanye West album is filled with different messages, different production styles, and a different underlying meaning at the end of the day. And regardless of, what's your favorite Kanye album or what's your favorite Kanye performance, era, song, whatever it comes down to, we all have to agree on one thing. Kanye West is a master at completing track lists and albums. If you go from start to finish on any of Kanye's albums, it's always a great experience. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about the true meaning of Donda because this is a beautiful album and there's maybe a lot of stuff from this track list that may have flew over your guys' heads and may have flew over everyone's head because this track list is fucking detailed to a T.
Yeah, and it's always fun to actually analyze Kanye West albums, and the way that we're actually going to do it today is divided in 4 different chapters, with the first one actually being us contextualizing the album. So like, where is Kanye coming from? What led him to the point and the state of mind that he's in, for the album of Donda and for the whole Donda experience. And then we'll move into the different parallels within Donda. And after we'll talk about how this album is kind of hip hop's album to God. And we'll kind of finish off with just some finishing thoughts and how we think the impact of Donda is going to play out in the future. So let's start off with like where Kanye was before going into this album. And I think a big part of this was Kanye's rebirth into Christianity, because if you take it back all the way to the beginning of Kanye's career, if you go on the College Dropout, his debut album, you have a song like Jesus Walks where he's pretty much, professing that he believes in Christianity and that he is a believer. And that was a huge moment because that kind of content matter wasn't really part of mainstream hip-hop.
Absolutely, and he was one of the first rappers to really do that, especially back then when the College Dropout was, released. A lot of people, before Kanye was actually signed as a rapper, because before he was doing production for Rockefeller as a producer, that was kind of like his demo single. Like, that's what the song that he was showing everyone. It was Jesus Walks, and a lot of people weren't a believer in the single because of the religious content matter, but Kanye knew that it was going to be a legendary track to kickstart his career, and Christianity has always been prominent without, all of his discography. I want to go back to 2016 with The Life of Pablo. There is a great amount of religious symbolism within that album. Ultralight Beam, for example. Then maybe you go on to Jesus is King. That's when you see he's making that full transition into Christianity and makes a full gospel album. So this was no secret from the beginning that Donda was going to keep these religious implements inside, and, we were going to go through this whole spiritual experience with Kanye and his beliefs. So as a fan and as a listener, how did that already set you up for, understanding I stumbled there, the totality, of the entire album?
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like Kanye has always kind of gone back and forth with his religion. I mean, in 2004, when after, Jesus Walks came out, he said, like, he was interviewed and he was asked, like, oh, so are you actually like a solid believer in Christianity? And he replied by saying, like, I do believe in God, but I would say that every day I kind of show that I'm not, the best believer and the best supporter of the faith that I could be. And then you move on to 2007 and his mother passes away, and that's a huge blow for Kanye. And that's when, you kind of start seeing that he is thinking more about faith. He is thinking about a higher power, and that's a way for him to kind of cope with the loss of his mother. And then in 2008, he's interviewed and says, he says that God has kind of chosen him to be a vessel and to be the voice and the connector for the people. And that's pretty interesting. And then as you go on into his discography, you see that the religious themes aren't really there. But in the 2010s, at certain concerts, he would claim to be a Christian, but it never really showed too much in the music. But then you go through the mental breakdowns that he had in 2016 and 2018, and that's kind of where he really found his footing, and that's when he became reborn finally in 2019, which led to Jesus is King, where it's pretty much an entire gospel album with hip-hop elements. And I feel like what was lacking with Jesus is King is fully brought on to course with Donda, because with Jesus is King, we did get Kanye yearning for this journey to salvation, but we didn't really get too much of the personal matter. We didn't get how that journey really built up to that.
Absolutely. And there was also a major event that was going down while, Kanye was making this album. And it was, unfortunately, the divorce with Kim Kardashian and, being separated from his family. And these are things we're going to talk about, going deeper into the album. But, this is a major part about the album, because I feel as if, Kanye was maybe at one of his lowest points in his, in his career, especially, all of the mental breakdowns that he had unfortunately had from 2016 to 2018. 2019. Like, this has been a rough couple of years for Kanye. And then, all of the scrutiny that he went under because of the political decisions. Like, Kanye's been under a lot of fire and a lot of heat and a lot of darkness, and all of that emotion, poured into this project. Not only that, but you could kind of see how the album develops that, this emotion is shown more throughout the track list, but like there's this sort of feeling and sentiment of healing. So, do you think that played into the major environment of the whole album?
100%. I mean, like, this is probably the second most traumatic event in Kanye's life after the passing of his mother, because if you think about it, he was married to Kim for 7 years. You know what I mean? Like, this was a huge stepping stone for Kanye in his life. He had 4 kids with Kim. So that family unit will always be the most important thing in his life. So to see it kind of fall apart in front of him, of course, that's going to inspire him musically. And that's kind of what this album is kind of leading into, is how Kanye is dealing and healing through this divorce. And I would say what he needs to get there. And we end up learning that it's the lessons and teachings from his mother Donda mixed in with his faith with God. So the whole journey is incredible. So let's actually now move in to the second chapter of this, and that's actually the parallel levels of Donda. And what's crazy is that when you have to look at the Donda experience and what the real message of the album is, I feel like it's not enough to just listen to the track list and just take it for a collection of songs, because it's so much more than that. It's an experience, from the listening parties to the performance art that he depicted in there, all the way to the final body of music that we did get. There's so many parallels to kind of work through. And what's interesting is that if you look at the first low point in his life, around the 2010 era, when he was fresh off losing his mother and still grieving after that loss, and then, of course, the public scrutiny after the VMAs experience, he came back in 2010 with his comeback album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and his first performance at the MTV Music Video Awards, he was dressed all in red. And now, if we fast forward to the first listening party for Donda, once again, he's dressed all in red. And to me, this just symbolizes Kanye being at this low point once again, and also him realizing that this is like his version of his own personal hell, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's cool because we had actually made that theory about the listening parties, where the listening parties were kind of like a cycle of life, going from hell, purgatory to heaven at the end of it. And you could see it throughout the whole album, and the Donda parallels are evident throughout all of it. So obviously we're going to start with, the first song, which is the Donda chant. Like, this was beautiful because a lot of people were confused when they first heard this at the first listening party, but you actually have Donda repeated, I believe it's 60 times in total, correct?
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because people were like, oh, what does this signify? And there was some theories. People thought it was, Donda's, last heartbeats. That was like a theory. I don't know if that's true. I have no source to confirm that.
I don't think so, to be honest.
It was just, I feel as if it meant more to the overall start of the album, kind of like someone crying out for Donda, someone,
Yes.
Reaching for that help, and kind of, Kanye trying to connect back to his mother, through this guidance and through this journey. And that's where you start the album, and then you transition into Jail. And this is a massive part of the track list, because this is where Kanye, I feel as if, is the lowest in the track list. In Jail, saying like, listen, like, take everything, I have no more, like, I feel as if I'm nothing, and the only one that I still have left in my corner is God. And then you have Jay-Z, who enters the second, I believe it's the second verse, and says, listen, it's okay, Donda, I have your son's back, and, guides him through this. So, from Donda's chant to Jail, did you start noticing those parallels right away?
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like this whole journey of this experience and this album is really Kanye trying to summon the spirit of Donda to seek her guidance during this loss in his life, and also using God and the inspiration that God gives him to get through this divorce and to cope with it, and to transform himself into a new person. Because a major parallel that I noticed too is that Kanye wants to be a new version of himself. He's kind of trying to welcome himself into being a single father, because that's where he is now. He has to try to balance keeping that family unit tight while also accepting that he's a single father now. And what's crazy is that Kanye is now a single father the same way that his mother Donda was a single mother, because Kanye's parents split up when I think he was like 3 years old. So that parallel of Kanye being in that same position as his mother just probably, I think, made him realize, okay, well, she did a great job raising me, and taught me so much about life and so much about what I carry forward into my own life. So now I have to be able to do the same things for my kids, but also be able to fully understand that this family unit is broken to some extent. But speaking on Jail, I do agree with you. I feel like it is the lowest point for Kanye in the whole album. And what's cool too is that Jay-Z also is channeling that spirit of Donda. He has a line where he says, "I can't see you, but I can touch you." And that's him saying how, Kanye doesn't have Donda in this physical realm anymore, but he's channeling her through the spiritual realm, and she's helping him get through whatever, obstacles he has in front of him.
Yeah, and it's cool because there's also a sort of like epic feeling to the production with the guitars, and it sort of feels as if Kanye's super emotional in his own right. And then, if you fast forward to Off the Grid, this is literally Kanye trying to escape his problems and move to Wyoming. Like, this is him, trying to feel like there's no worries on his shoulders, and he could be in an environment where, he could take time for himself, but he also has this side to it where he feels bad that he has to leave his family for some time, and he feels apologetic on a song like Hurricane, talking about not being able to spend more time with his family, and that kind of taking away from his internal love for his family. And then it's beautiful because then you start to understand the overall nuance of the project and how it's developing from start, and then you could see it going into the midway of the album. So then we get to a song like Praise God, where, Kanye attempts from going from a sinner to a born-again Christian, and then you could start to see the full fucking development of the track list here.
He wants to get out of that grave, and I guess that grave is everything that defined him before. Like, he has to understand that, like, every issue, every thing that he caused that he deems as wrong, every sin of his, he wants that cleansed. He wants to get rid of the ego from the past. And that's what's amazing about this album, is that he's so vulnerable here. He's so honest. And on a song like Hurricane, like we were just talking about, he has a line where he said, like, let me get a new chick, right? Because there was the whole Irina Shayk rumors and whatever else this summer. And to me, that's just like, this is Kanye finding a temporary solution. This is him kind of trying to fill a void. And, as we see the track list progress, he's in denial, but then he kind of slowly starts realizing that this will be how his life will progress. So it's pretty interesting. And if you move on to Junior, he's kind of rapping about how, he better find God before God finds him. So he better get his act together before it's too late, and before he goes from being in his own personal mental hell to actual hell.
Yeah, and then you move on to Believe What I Say, and this is a actual pivotal point within the track list, because this is when Kanye finally starts accepting somewhat, because he's still struggling to accept it, but the whole divorce with Kim, and understanding where she's coming from, and understanding that I have to let this go down. But there's also like this sort of, I would say, like hurt from Kanye, because he's saying like, I gave you everything I have, like, how could this be the final outcome of this? And it's beautiful because now you're it's still negative in a certain aspect, but there's this silver lining that's starting to appear within the progression of the track list, and you notice like it's starting to unfold as you go through. So, when you were this deep into the track list, did you feel as if you were starting to uncover the message more and more, or did you feel as if, you were still struggling towards the end?
Believe What I Say was definitely a pivotal point, because everything before that, I feel like Kanye's in denial, he's angry, and that's why the production on songs like Jail and God Breathe are more chaotic, they're more messy, because that's how he's feeling internally. But you move on to Believe What I Say, and it's okay. Now there's a sense of hope. Now I'm into this kind of this happy and more cheerful kind of energy, and it is one of the most upbeat songs on the whole album. And what's interesting is that even though he kind of has a happier outlook, you can still see that he's pleading for Kim to stay with him. And that's, I think, a big part of this album too, is that, it might be Kanye trying to still win her over, even though he's grappling with the fact that, okay, I have to let go. On songs, I Believe What I Say, he's still holding on.
And he's showing that through the content and the writing.
Of course. And what's crazy too is that the song, of course, is called Believe What I Say, but you don't hear Kanye rapping that for the entire song. But towards the end of the song, we get Buju Banton, who's actually a Jamaican reggae singer, and he has a vocal passage where he says, "I didn't throw a fit when you said you wanted to leave. I told you I loved you, but you didn't believe." And that's, Kanye saying, believe what I say. Believe me when I tell you that I love you. Believe me when I tell you that this family and our marriage is a priority. Like, Kanye really wanted Kim to get that message across, and it's a beautiful song, man. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
and you could see that there's this really nice shift in tempo in the track list after this, because you go to 24 and it feels like this beautiful therapy session. You hear the choir vocals in back, and the whole thing is like, we gonna be okay. Like, we're gonna be okay throughout this process of, grief, this process of accepting loss, this process of, hurt and negative energy. So, it's nice because, yes, the content matter is still very realistic. It's still very dark, but in a certain way, there's acceptance behind that, and you could see that now it's starting to develop into an album where it's full of hope. It's going to start developing into an album where there is that silver lining that's developing into the whole lining. So 24 is beautiful too, because if it was not for the Sunday choir, I don't think 24 would have been as good as it is.
Definitely not.
And it's definitely one of my favorite tracks off of the whole album, regardless of how simple it is, because it signifies so much. It's that one part of the album that fully has that transition, that fully takes you into a whole different part of the track list, and then that's when stuff just starts getting really interesting. And you could start to see, okay, there's a development within this story. I saw Kanye at his lowest on songs like Jail, and now there's this pivotal transition. So how did you like that in the track list? Because it's fucking genius to a certain extent.
It is genius because, like I said, the actual development from track to track is just so smooth. And like you were saying, you go from Believe What I Say, where, yes, he's still pleading for Kim to take him back and to try to maybe make things work, but he's in a different energy. He's trying to now seek comfort, which takes you to 24, where he reaches out to God and says that only God can make this all right. And then you go towards the end of the song, and he sings, "Know You're Alive and God's Not Finished." And that's him speaking to Donda once again. And then 2 songs later, you go on to Moon, and that's where, Kanye is saying that he wants to reach the moon, and that, Donda, his mother, left him too soon. He wants to be spiritually reconnected with her, because in times of need like this, in the past, Kanye always had his mother to be that shoulder to lean on. You know what I mean? Like, that was always what Kanye, that was always Kanye's moral support. So, I mean, to see him kind of look for that comfort was really soothing, and really, it showed us that, okay, now Kanye's ready to maybe move forward, and he's looking for different ways to cope. But I think a real breaking point that kind of closes off, let's say, the first act of the album, if you will. I mean, I feel like the acts are not really structured, too much, but I feel like Heaven or Hell is a tipping point, because at this point, Kanye's looking at his marriage in the rear view, and he's saying how, like, the conflicts with Kim aren't going to be as present anymore, and that he wants this new life, he wants this new breath, and it sounds like he's getting out of this mental hell. That's the way that I kind of interpret it.
And you could also see it throughout the production, because Heaven and Hell is very interesting, because it's kind of sort of like the breakthrough. It's the final thing of positivity. Like, fuck, we made it, like, we did it. We went from there, and now we're here. And you could kind of hear that with the whole beat switch and the beat drop, in this song. Like, when, Kanye goes a bit a cappella, and then after that, boom, those grand vocals and the 808s kick in. I love that part, because it perfectly signifies, like, fuck, it's so epic to go through that process, like, look where I started, and look where I'm at now with this grieving process, and now I'm gonna start breaking forward, and I'm gonna start doing shit for me, because it is about me. And then Kanye, actually says something where he's like, wait, hold on, I have it in the notes here, wait 1 second. It says, it's never too late for him to save you. Like, that's fucking beautiful, because at a certain point in the track list, you feel as if Kanye has no hope. You feel as if Kanye has no more energy to give. You feel as if he's at the lowest point, and then it takes you to a whole different place on this track.
And
list.
I feel like, for the whole album, I mean, we'll get more into how this affects the features on the album, and also us as listeners on the next chapter. But for here, it's like with Heaven or Hell, he's kind of holding a mirror to his own life. And by him saying it's never too late for him to save you, he's kind of referring to how God's salvation is there for everybody else too. And like, just the way that he's using God to cope with this loss, you can use God as well to get through any situation that you're going through. So that was super special. It was a good moment. And then we move on to Donda, which is actually the title track. And this is where you get this vocal passage from Donda. And she's pretty much saying how Kanye has touched so many different generations, and how everything that he is, the person that he's become, is all grounded in his roots, in his foundation. And that's a super special message because Donda's now living through Kanye's art. And this is an example of how Kanye uses Donda's teachings to cope with, the major traumatic events in his life.
Yeah, and I also feel as if Donda's a special track on this on the track list because it's the first time you sort of feel that transition of like Donda's, sort of influence on here. Like you finally have her coming through after a massive track like Heaven or Hell. And then, it's beautiful because that passage added so much to the guidance of this thematic basis. Like it helped you understand, what Kanye was going for. And, just placing it there was genius because it's almost midway through. So now, the shift is confirmed. We're going into a different part of the album. We're getting something new, and then that's when we're getting something like Jesus Lord, where Kanye's just absolutely ripping it apart on a beautiful fucking verse, just getting the most introspective that I've ever heard him. Like he feels as if he's comfortable enough to talk about shit that haunts him, shit that bothers him, and starts understanding a deeper message. So when you were at this point in the album, did you feel as if Kanye was regaining that confidence back when he was creating that music?
He was. I just feel like this was maybe the realest that Kanye was on the entire album. And, he talks about people leaving him and how he's had suicidal thoughts in the past. So he is kind of clouded by some darkness here as he's reflecting. But I just feel like he's at a point here where there is that acceptance because he's letting so much out. He's vocalizing so much that's on his mind. So that is part of the healing process, I do think. And he's also saying how, like, he wants to be reconnected with his mother in the afterlife. He has lines saying, and if I talk to Christ, can I bring my mother back to life?
Yeah.
Like, that's super deep. And that's just because, it's crazy because there's another parallel with the whole Donda situation. And it's the fact that Kim has almost become, what Donda was to Kanye, because Donda was kind of that comfort that, that was there to serenade him and to kind of help him get through certain personal battles. And then Kim became that person for him. She became that mother figure in a sense through their marriage. So to lose both of them did hit Kanye very hard. And it's just interesting to see that, Kanye is really, he's really seeking that guidance from Donda.
Absolutely. And you see it on a song like Lord, I Need You, where Kanye's literally singing about missing the comfort of Kim Kardashian and trying to, missing that presence next to you because, we're like, relationships are looked at in so many different ways, but when you connect with someone you love like that, it offers so much value to your life. It puts you into a completely different zone. And I feel as if that's what Kanye's trying to say here is like, no matter how big I am, no matter my stature, if my name's Kanye West, I still miss that presence in my life. I need it. It's kind of like that whole thing of playing into Lord, I Need You. Like, I can't do this by myself. I can't be here trying to go through this process and, feeling all these different emotions without, a shoulder to lean on. And that's beautiful because it's Kanye West saying this. It's like this guy has packed, the biggest arenas in the world, just to come listen to his music. And he still feels these, vulnerabilities. He still feels these depressions.
We all do.
And that's the beautiful part about the album too, is like he's also telling people it's okay to feel these things. It's okay to understand your difficulties and to understand, all the different things that make you who you are. Like that's what I love about this. And, it's such a deep fucking album because there's so much you could find out of it. And honestly, like the listening experience was beautiful because the more and more you go through this track list, the more and more you end up uncovering.
Yeah. And you have to think about it this way too, is that like, he's yearning for that connection to Donda and he's still holding on to Kim because those two figures in his life are completely irreplaceable. Like you can never replace that bond with your mother the same way that you can't replace that bond with the mother of your children. Like those two figures are just so essential to who you are as a person. They end up identifying you. And then we get a song like Pure Souls where Kanye is really saying like, this is the new me, so get used to me. Like he's fully embracing at this point the fact that he's no longer the person that's riddled with controversy. He's no longer the person that is obsessed with material possessions, or that is only in it for for certain pleasures that are temporary. Like, he's saying that this is a new chapter. He's embracing it. Even though he's a single father, he's gonna make it work. And I feel like at this point he's finally getting some clarity, and it's super key to the album.
Yeah, and you find that clarity on Come to Life too, because this is Kanye sort of accepting everything, but also saying like, okay, now I'm changed, but I want to be reconnected with my family. I want to be there. I want to say like, fuck it, like I'm connected again, and I could feel that connection once again. And he says a line that's actually really deep. He says, "This is not about me. God is still alive, so I'm free." Like, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than, this ego materialistic world. Like, I want to be with my kids, and I want to have that connection again, because that's what makes me complete. And I absolutely love that message, because it's something that we don't hear about in the industry enough. And artists have a hard time opening up about that stuff.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that Never Abandon Your Family should have been on the album? Because it was part of the listening experience, and it was a super emotional moment as Kanye was on his knees and kind of, he was replaying that passage from his mother of her saying, "Never abandon your family," because that was one of the major lessons that she taught him, because his own family had been through that. Donda and Kanye's father had been through a separation, and one big piece of, I would say, knowledge that she left him was literally saying, like, make sure to never abandon that family. So do you think that should have been included on the final mix?
I think it would have added a lot to the track list, but nonetheless, I'm still very happy with the track listing that I got. But yes, I think at this point of the track list, it would have been super cool to slot it in, because it would have played into it. But who knows how the track list would have sounded with that in it? We'll never know. But let's actually go on to No Child Left Behind, because this is when the story comes to a full close.
The outro.
And it's crazy, because this is where Kanye finally reconnects with his mother and finally learns his final lesson, and that's just, being connected to your higher self and understanding that there's more to life than, all of these different egotistic things that we can't find and that we have a trouble maintaining. So what was your emotion, going through No Child Left Behind and understanding the deep message behind it?
I think when I first saw it, when I first saw the second listening party and saw him ascending to heaven, I'm like, okay, this is meant to represent him being with Donda in a spiritual sense. So I was happy about that, because I felt like it was a super meaningful moment. But I think it's more than that. I think it kind of signifies Kanye, I would say, taking the lessons from God, taking the lessons from Donda, and being able to transform himself. He's no longer the man that's filled with greed or with ego. He's a man now of faith and family, and it's also represented by what we saw at that last listening party when he's in his childhood home and he's, burning to flames. And that's kind of representing that old version of him no longer existing. That's him kind of stripping away everything that he was, everything that defined him. And that also includes that physical connection to his hometown and to Donda in the physical realm, because now he's spiritually reconnected with her, and he's finally been able to grasp her true teachings, and now he can finally be that man of faith and family. Even though his family is split apart, he knows that he can make it work. He has that clarity that he's been looking for, and it was a great moment on the album.
Not only that, but I also feel as if he understands his role as a musician now and the types of messages that he needs to relay. He understands the type of, let's say, role he needs to play in society, and what's his true calling? What's that teaching? What type of message do you want to preach? What do you want to spread? Because throughout all of Kanye's discography, yes, this religious symbolism has always been prominent, but you get something like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, that's the complete opposite of Donda. So it's like now I feel as if he's moving into this new artistic direction, with his art, and he's only going to get better, because this sounds super personal and I want to hear more. I'm intrigued to the point where I want to hear another album about more teachings, about more knowledge, about, what Kanye thinks about certain situations, because now that he's reached this clarity and this certain level of thinking through his music and was able to execute it in such a fashion like Donda.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely beautiful.
It was beautiful. And I also love the ending of that listening party where people were asking themselves questions of being like, why is Kim walking down this aisle? Why do we have a recreation of a wedding? And at first I didn't pick up on it, but now I realize that this is Kanye and Kim vowing to be the best co-parents that they could be. This is them saying that that bond they have as co-parents, as partners in raising these kids, that's not going anywhere. And that was kind of the main takeaway for Kanye, was realizing that he won't have Kim to serenade him anymore. He won't have Kim to necessarily comfort him the way that she used to, but he still has that family unit, and that'll never go away, and his kids will always be supported. So I found that beautiful. And also the title track of No Child Left Behind, when Vori's singing that, it literally has a double message. And again, that's another parallel, because it refers to no child left behind in the sense that Kanye's kids will be looked after. He will not be leaving them. He will always fully support them and, be with them through their journeys in life. And the double meaning behind that too is the fact that, no child is left behind, and Kanye has reconnected with his mother. So it's genius. It's genius messaging, and I just love everything Kanye did with that. But let's now move on to the third chapter of this. And this is a huge moment, because in terms of hip-hop music, you don't often get albums where you have a bunch of features and the biggest artists in the industry all connected with one big theme and topic. And what's crazy too is that if you really think about it, there's 33 features on this album. It's Kanye's most collaborative album yet, and the features actually take up the majority of the album's runtime. They take up 53% of the vocals on the album. So when you contextualize that and realize that every feature, for the most part, with a few exceptions, are all speaking about God and how God has played a role in their lives, that's fucking impactful, man.
It is super impactful, and you get some of the biggest star-studded features in the whole industry on this album. And I almost feel as if this was, like, let's say, a confession session for a lot of artists on this album, because there's not one feature that has an empty verse. There's not one, let's say, artist that just put together a random verse and, just phoned it in and, had something there to be there with empty messaging and, empty corny bars. No, this was meaningful. Like, I could start with Jay-Z on Jail, saying that, he has to almost pray 5 times a day for, how many sins he's committed. Even, let's say on Hurricane, The Weeknd, talking about how, he's found God within himself and how it's, he's saved his life because of that sort of stuff. Like, there is so much religious symbolism, but it's done in such a clean, organized way. And the fact that the majority of the album is taken up by these features, and it sounds super refreshing, and there's still that super deep, layering to the album while keeping that coherentness. It's still genius, because you're going through this album and you're finding so many different things that are going through it. So, when you found out that there was going to be that many features, then you heard the features, and then you heard the content matter of those features. How did you find that played into the overall theme of the album?
It was genius, because to me, again, that showed me that this album is about Kanye, but it's also not about Kanye. Like, he's just holding that mirror that he's representing himself, but there's that duality of how he's really speaking for everybody. And that's very well showcased on the song God Breathe, where Kanye raps, "I know God is in all of us." And that's at the beginning of the track list, and it foreshadows how the message at the core of this album is really how, God really can be within all of us. And like he says on Heaven or Hell, it's never too late. And what's cool too is that we have these parallels on a song like Jail, where on the original version of Jail featuring Jay-Z, you have Kanye rapping about how, he's done certain things that the media has held him accountable for, and he's been wrapped up in a lot of controversy, but God is there to be the real judge. God will be there to either forgive him or not. And you can bring that parallel to having someone like the Baby on Jail Part 2, where he's been under a lot of public scrutiny now, and Kanye is saying it's not too late for anybody. He can redeem himself. And that's what this album feels like for a lot of the featured artists, is one big road to redemption. And that's fucking special.
Yeah, it's massively special, because what other album has done this or will do this like Kanye? Like, I really don't think there's an album that has ever touched this much subject matter and deep subject matter, because you have a lot of people on here with massive impacts, preaching the word of God, and even the, depending on how into it they are, or how religious they are, or how dedicated they are to their faith, these people are legitimately using their runtime on an album as big as Donda to be able to fully spread a beautiful message about, loving life and, understanding the pain and struggles and the natural nuances of the process of life. And that's what's beautiful is like, you're going to gain that hope. You're going to gain that sort of knowledge while listening to Donda, and you could go through it. Even let's say, take West Side Gun and Conway and their features. Those were massive fucking features because, you have West Side Gun kind of saying like, thank God I made it. Thank God,
I'm still here.
I'm still here. I've gone through so much. I don't know how I'm doing it, but I'm still here. And then you have Conway talking about the situation of how he got shot and, how he almost, completely passed away and he wouldn't have been able to, rap, and how he wouldn't have been able to, further his legacy. So there's all this different type of deep introspection that, is playing into the role of this album.
Yeah, and Conway kind of says that, God worked a miracle on me the same way that Kanye is expressing that message on No Child Left Behind. And what's cool too is that I feel like Kanye fully realized and fully embodied being his own version of Paul the Apostle, because that's who he kind of wanted to be on the life of Pablo, right? There was the three Pablos. There was Pablo Picasso, the mover of art. There was Pablo Escobar, the mover of product, and then Paul the Apostle,
the mover of message.
Yeah, who was a big, who was a big apostle and who actually, was one of the biggest spreaders of Christianity. And now Kanye is kind of taking that role, but in the music realm, and it's needed because there's not enough talk and enough messaging about faith, I would say, overall in hip-hop and in music in general. And for an album to be this massive with all of these artists all connecting with one message, I don't think it's ever been done before, and we may never see this ever again. So we can't fucking let this go and not acknowledge it.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing to acknowledge. And regardless if, whatever religion you believe in, whether it's, Christianity or, you're Muslim or,
even if you don't have a religion.
Or Islam or, whatever it is, at the end of the day, as long as, you stay true to yourself and you live a good, wholesome life where you love everyone, that's what will get you through this process of life and all of the hardship that comes with it. Like, I think that's what also Kanye's trying to, say here is like, regardless of, how it's packaged or the religion behind it, just live your life and live it in a beautiful way, the way you want to do it, not the way, people make it seem, and like all of like the dirty attractions and all of, the stuff that gets people poisoned and all of the stuff that corrupts the mind. No, stay true to yourself and follow that light, because it will bring you to this bigger place. And I think that's where we're going to go with chapter 4 and talking about the impact of Donda, because this was a beautiful album. And how do you think this is going to impact, generations to come? Because, example, an album similar to this is the life of Pablo aesthetically, speaking, because of all of, like, let's say, the manic productions, all the different styles, the big feature list. But this reminds me more of 808s and Heartbreak. So we saw how influential that album was. How do you think this one will affect people to come?
Yeah, I feel like when you're this vulnerable with your audience and you're this personal, it's bound to stick with people. And I feel like when you're listening to any kind of music, people are kind of looking for a feeling to enjoy. They're looking for a message they can relate to, and melodies that will stick with them, let's say. And with the themes of God and with redemption being so present in Donda, I feel like, he's created music for his whole fan base to be able to relate to. And like I said, that vulnerability will inevitably live on with people because of how real this was. And this is Kanye really taking an event in his life and making art out of it. So how will this not stick with the fans? And I feel like whenever you're talking about the cycle of life, if it's, birth, death, if it's about the great beyond and just, your spirituality, that's universal content matter that can never get stale.
That'll never. No, it really can't, because it's within all of us, and it's a process that will, every single person who's living on this planet will have to go through. And it's also about understanding, how to find those silver linings within these issues and being able to come through such a dark place and finding this light where you're almost ascending into heaven spiritually while still being into this, while still being grounded into this physical realm. Like, that's what's beautiful about it, is there's all these different moving parts to life, and it's so simple that it's complicated. Like, you just have to focus on that one thing that makes you happy and be you, be the best version that you could possibly be, and understand that the dark times will come. Understand that, the depression and the darkness will have an effect on you to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, there's always that one little bleep of light that will allow you to, transform yourself, will allow you to put yourself into a different environment. And, regardless, there's a law to life, and it's that regardless of how dark it is in a room, you could have the darkest, world in the room. Scientifically, there will always be a little point of light. And that's what you have to understand when you're going through all of these hardships, all of these sort of things that bring you down in this life. It's being able to gravitate towards that and not the darkness. And sometimes that could be so hard, but I feel as if that's what this album does. It allows you to understand things for what they are. It allows you to be real with yourself. And I feel as if a lot of people are going to be using this album sort of as like their own self-medication, their own sort of self-therapy, where they're just going to play this record and they're going to go on with their day regardless of how hard shit might get. And this is so important to the music industry, because who's really done this for people? Who's been, touching upon these complex subject matters that, people might get offended by, because everyone's getting offended by everything nowadays,
Yeah, I know.
So it was geniusly, packaged, and I absolutely love this album.
I love the whole experience, to be honest with you. And like, I can't even look at this album and rate it or critique it as a collection of songs, because like I said earlier, this is so much more than that. This is Kanye taking a moment in his life and literally projecting it into an expression of art. If it's him covering up his face and wearing that mask, if it's him doing this performance art and literally not saying a word to people, but showing his emotions through movement, it's so impactful. And I don't care if there's some songs on Donda that I won't revisit, but there's so many moments that feel angelic and heavenly and that bring these messages of hope and that idea that, like you were saying, there's always that beam of light, and sometimes religion can be a vessel to finding that. So Kanye knocked it out of the park, and this album is just so layered, and I just love the fact that he used guidance from his roots, from his foundation with his mother Donda, channeling and summoning her spirit, so that he can feel that and take that guidance mixed in with whatever inspiration, motivation he gains from God to actually go and heal from this divorce and move forward as a transformed father and person. It was so complex of an album to kind of analyze, and I feel like there's a lot that we probably didn't pick up on and that we will pick up on in the future, but as an experience, it just feels so wholesome, man.
Absolutely. There's not a project that has came out like this in a very long time. Like, there's a lot of stuff to digest within Donda, and honestly, it's just been an experience talking about this album on the podcast, because, it's been so fun to do content. It's been fun to, keep you guys updated with everything, and it's been fun, to just have conversations with you about this, because Kanye is coming back in full force with an album that has, completely blown up the industry. I mean, hip hop is back. It's at its strongest place that it's ever been in the past 2 years. And I feel as if now coming back with this sort of message is beautiful. And this is what people need and want to hear.
And I feel like in terms of messaging, it's going to be very hard for an album to combat this. I mean, this is such a grand and epic kind of statement from Kanye. And who else is going to dive this deep into their personal life and into their emotions? So such an impactful album, and I think that's why so many people are excited about it, because not only is it moving musically and instrumentally, but also through the messages and through what Kanye wants to project throughout this whole Donda experience. And that's why he said this is the album of the life, not the album of the year, because this is his life projected in front of us. This feels like his own version of a Greek tragedy just playing out in front of our eyes. And he's just so open with us about it. And that's life-changing for Kanye, and it will be life-changing for some Kanye West fans. And thank you to our fans who actually voted on this episode from our Patreon. So the options this week actually were...
There's a lot of good options that go up on the Patreon. I want to do a lot of these.
This was close, man, because the first option was top 5 moments from Drake's Certified Lover Boy, which got 13 votes. But then the true meaning behind Kanye West Donda got 16 votes. And the last option was the problem with album delays, which would be a good conversation, which got only 1 vote. But I'm not surprised that people want to see this album analyzed because, like I said, Kanye just put so much into it. But if you guys actually want to have your say in future episodes, the link to our Patreon memberships are in the description below, so you can check over there and have your say in our future episode topics.
Absolutely. And listen, guys, we brought together NFR's comment of the week, and this is funny because I was going through the comments yesterday, and I posted this on my story.
You sent me this right away. Yeah.
Madison, Maine, and this is, the perfect embodiment of what we wanted NFR to be.
Yeah.
Smoking a bowl while eating some snacks and watching NFR podcast. Life is good. Like, that means a lot to me personally because this is what, I envisioned NFR when we started, man. Like, I wanted people to come here, enjoy themselves, and not to be burdened with, a bunch of bullshit talk that they could find on other platforms. Like, NFR is strictly for the music. It's about the music. And a lot of people ask, like, why we don't go into scandals or why we don't go into gossip. And it's just because I'm not interested, man.
I'm not.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that. Like, we want to create this positive space where everyone could enjoy the music, people could interact with each other wholesomely and never offensively. I see you guys in the comments sometimes getting a bit rowdy, but regardless, keep it respectful. Just talking about, different ideologies within music, and it's the same thing you could find within Donda. Like, you could go through any album you want and depict it and, try and find all of these messages because at the end of the day, regardless of the artist name, regardless of the artist album, it is art, and that is the way it is meant to be.
Yeah, and doing these lyrical breakdowns and kind of analyzing these albums is not something that we've done for a long time on the channel, and it was fun to do, man. Honestly, we should do more of these.
Absolutely, and we probably will do more of these. So guys, on that note, if you did enjoy this episode, please subscribe to the channel because we are doing content on the daily here. We've been keeping you guys updated through the biggest releases of the year. So, we're finishing Donda up right now. We're in post rollout. We're going into Drake by the album CLB didn't come out by the time of this recording, but it will be out by the time you guys hear this episode. And we still have Kendrick, we have Travis, probably ASAP Rocky's rumored to drop, new Pusha T, new Jid. So stay up to date with all of that by subscribing. And not only that, but, leave your favorite moments from the album in the comment section because we always go through that and we always like having a conversation with you guys. So once again, thank you so much for watching and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for watching the video. It's always a pleasure doing content for you guys. Listen, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because we're doing album reviews and we actually have our series called Everything We Know where we take you guys through the whole album rollout of the hottest releases of the year. Not only that, guys, but our Patreon plan is now live. You guys could access that in the bio. I appreciate you guys and I'll see you on the next one.